Have you ever wondered if your entire life was already written down somewhere? Every choice you'll make, every person you'll meet, every moment of joy and heartbreak, all recorded before it even happens? I thought that was just fantasy, something from movies and books. But on a cold Tuesday night in November, an old man in a subway station showed me something that changed everything I believed about life, destiny, and the very fabric of reality itself. He showed me the archive, and what I found inside about my own future and humanity's fate was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. This is the true story of what happened when I learned that free will might be nothing more than a beautiful lie we tell ourselves. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is how I discovered that everything, absolutely everything, was already written. If you're fascinated by stories that make you question reality and the choices we make every single day, you're going to love what happens next. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Now, let's dive into Sarah's incredible journey. I was 23 years old, working at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, and completely convinced that my life was going nowhere. Every morning felt the same. Wake up at 5 a.m., take the train to work, serve coffee to tired strangers, go home, sleep, repeat. My apartment was tiny. My paycheck barely covered rent. My college degree in history sat in a drawer, completely useless. But on November 14th, everything changed. It was 11 p.m., and I was waiting at the Clark Street subway station after closing the shop. The platform was nearly empty, just me, a teenager with headphones, and an old man sitting on a bench at the far end. He looked about 70, wearing a long gray coat that had seen better days. His white hair stuck out in wild directions, and he kept staring at me with these intense blue eyes. I tried to ignore him. In Chicago, you learn not to make eye contact with strange people on the subway, but he kept staring. Finally, he stood up and walked straight toward me. "Sarah Mitchell," he said in a raspy voice. My heart jumped. "How do you know my name?" He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was sad, like he knew something terrible. "I know everything about you, Sarah. I know you were born on March 3rd. I know your mother died when you were 12. I know you have a scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 8. I know you applied to 6 graduate schools and got rejected by all of them." I stepped back, my hand reaching for my phone. "Are you following me? Because I'll call the police right now." "I'm not following you," he said calmly. "I'm reading you." "Reading me? What does that even mean?" The old man reached into his coat and pulled out a small card. It was old and yellow, like paper from 100 years ago. On it was written just one thing: The Archive, 1247 Wabash Avenue, basement level. "Come tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. I'll show you something that will answer every question you've ever had about your life. But I warn you, Sarah, once you see the archive, you can never unsee it. Some knowledge is a burden, not a gift." Before I could respond, the train arrived. The doors opened, and the old man stepped inside. I stood frozen on the platform, the card in my hand. The doors closed, and the train disappeared into the dark tunnel. I should have thrown the card away. I should have forgotten about the whole weird encounter. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How did he know those things about me? My mother's death wasn't public information. The scar on my knee was hidden under my jeans. The graduate school rejections? I hadn't told anyone about those, not even my best friend. The next day at work, I was distracted. I messed up orders, spilled coffee, gave wrong change. My manager, Tom, asked if I was feeling okay. "I'm fine, just tired." But I wasn't fine. The card sat in my pocket like a stone. 1247 Wabash Avenue kept echoing in my mind. I looked it up during my break. It was an old office building in the South Loop, built in 1923. According to the internet, most of it was abandoned now. Only a few businesses on the first floor were still operating. As closing time approached, I made a decision. I would go. Not because I believed in magical archives or destiny or any of that nonsense, but because I needed answers. I needed to know how that old man knew so much about me. At 11:45 p.m., I stood outside 1247 Wabash Avenue. The building looked dead. Dark windows stared down at me like empty eyes. A sign on the door said, "No trespassing," but when I tried the handle, it was unlocked. Inside, the lobby was dark, except for emergency lights casting green shadows on the walls. Dust covered everything. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor. I found the stairs and went down, my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. The basement hallway was narrow and cold. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. I was about to turn back when I saw light coming from under a door at the end of the hall. On the door was a small metal plate. Archive. I knocked. "Come in, Sarah," the old man's voice said from inside. "I've been expecting you." I pushed open the door and stepped into a room that shouldn't exist. It was massive, bigger than the entire building above it. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and rows upon rows of shelves extended in every direction, filled with books. Thousands of them, maybe millions. The air smelled like old paper and something else, something like electricity before a storm. The old man sat at a desk in the center of the room. He looked exactly the same as the night before, except now he wore reading glasses perched on his nose. "Welcome to the archive," he said. "My name is Walter Hayes. I am the keeper. And before you ask, yes, this is real. Yes, I know it seems impossible, and yes, your life is about to change forever." I walked toward him slowly, my eyes trying to take in the impossible size of the room. "What is this place?" "This is where every human life is recorded," Walter said simply. "Every person who has ever lived, who is living now, and who will ever live, their story is written here. Past, present, and future. Every choice, every moment, every consequence. All of it is in these books." I laughed. It was a nervous, disbelieving laugh. "That's crazy. You're telling me this is some kind of, what, library of destiny?" "Not destiny," Walter corrected. "Truth. The archive doesn't create the future, Sarah. It records it. There's a difference." "Show me," I said. "If this is real, show me my book." Walter stood up and walked to a nearby shelf. His fingers traced along the spines of books until he found one. He pulled it out, a thick volume bound in dark leather. On the spine was written, "Mitchell, Sarah, Ann." My full name, including my middle name, which I never used. He handed it to me. "Everything you've ever done is in there. Everything you will do. Every person you'll meet. Every choice you'll make. Open it if you want, but remember what I told you. Some knowledge is a burden." My hands shook as I opened the book. The first page showed my birth certificate. The second page had a photo of me as a baby. The third page described my first steps, my first words. I flipped faster. There was my 7th birthday party, my first day of school, the bike accident that gave me the scar, my mother's funeral. Every detail was perfect. Every moment was exactly as I remembered it. Then I reached the present day, November 15th, and I read words that made my blood freeze. At 12:03 a.m., Sarah Mitchell enters the archive for the first time. She opens her book. She reads about her mother's death. She begins to cry. I looked at the clock on Walter's desk, 12:03 a.m., and I began to cry. "How is this possible?" I whispered.
Walter sat back down at his desk. That's the question everyone asks. The truth is, I don't know. I've been the keeper for 40 years, and I still don't understand how the archive works. I only know that it does. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. I saw tomorrow, I saw next week, I saw myself going to work, having conversations, making decisions. It was all there, written out like a script. Then I flipped to a page 1 month ahead, December 15th, and what I read there made the room spin. No, this can't be right. But Walter's sad smile told me it was, because according to my book, in exactly 30 days, I was going to die. If this story is blowing your mind right now, wait until you see what happens next. Take a second to smash that like button if you're enjoying this journey with Sarah, and drop a comment below. Do you believe in free will, or do you think everything is already written? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's get back to the story, because things are about to get even more intense. I slammed the book shut and threw it on Walter's desk. This is fake. This is some kind of sick joke. Walter didn't move. He just looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes. It's not fake, Sarah. I wish it were. Then you're telling me I have 30 days to live? That's it? That's my whole future? I'm telling you what the archive shows. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change what's written. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my legs felt like concrete. Instead, I grabbed the book again and flipped to December 15th. The page was detailed, too detailed. It said I would be walking home from work at 7:15 p.m. A blue Toyota would run a red light at the corner of State and Monroe. The driver would be checking his phone. I would die instantly. The driver's name was listed, James Peterson, age 34, distracted by a text from his wife. This is insane, I said. If this is really written, then I can just not be there. I won't walk home that way. I'll take a different route. I'll call in sick that day. I'll do something different. Walter shook his head. Others have tried that. It doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? He stood up and walked to another shelf. He pulled out a different book. This one looked older, the leather cracked and faded. This was a woman named Grace Cooper. She came to the archive in 1987. She read that she would die in a car accident on Christmas Eve. She decided to stay home that day, locked her doors, didn't drive anywhere, didn't even go outside. And, I asked, and her neighbor's car lost control on the icy street and crashed through her living room wall. She died at exactly the time the book said she would. Walter closed the book gently. The archive isn't a prediction, Sarah. It's a record of what happens. When you try to change it, reality finds a way to keep the story on track. I felt sick. So you're saying I can't change anything? My whole future is locked in? Every future is locked in, Walter said. Everyone who's ever lived. Their choices, their actions, their fate, it's all been written since the beginning of time. The archive doesn't create the story. It simply contains it. I sat down hard in a chair. My mind was racing. If this was true, if everything was already written, then nothing I did mattered. Every choice I thought I was making was just following a script. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Why tell me about my death? Why not just let me live my life without knowing? Walter's expression softened. Because 30 years ago, someone showed me. Someone brought me here and revealed the archive. And in my book, it said I would become the next keeper, that I would spend the rest of my life in this room, watching over these records, waiting for the person who would replace me. Replace you? He nodded. I'm 74 years old, Sarah. According to my book, I have 6 months left. And according to your book, well, your story doesn't end on December 15th. I felt confused. But you just said I die in 30 days. I said your book shows you dying, but there's more to it than that. Walter picked up my book again and flipped past December 15th. Look at this page, December 16th. I looked. The page wasn't blank. It had writing. It described me waking up in the archive. It described Walter teaching me how the system worked. It described me becoming the new keeper. I don't understand, I said. How can I die and then wake up the next day? Because death in the outside world means rebirth in the archive. When someone is chosen to be keeper, they must die first. Their connection to the normal world must be severed. Then they wake up here, and they stay here forever. The word forever echoed in my head. You're saying I'm trapped? I can't leave? You can leave whenever you want, Walter said, but reality outside the archive becomes difficult. Time doesn't work right for keepers who spend too long away. You'll age faster, you'll feel disconnected, eventually you'll have to come back. This becomes your home, your prison, your purpose. I stood up fast, knocking the chair over. I didn't ask for this. I don't want to be a keeper. I don't want to spend my life in some basement surrounded by books I'll never meet. Neither did I, Walter said simply. But here we are. I grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. I headed for the door. Where are you going? Walter asked. Home, away from here. I'm going to forget this ever happened. You can't forget, he said. You've read your book. You've seen December 15th. Every day from now until then, you'll remember what's coming. You'll count down the hours, and when that blue Toyota runs the red light, you'll know exactly what's about to happen. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle. He was right. I could leave, but I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. Why me? I asked without turning around. Why did you choose me? I didn't choose you. The archive did. Your name appeared in my book 3 years ago. It said I would meet you on November 14th at Clark Street Station. It said you would come here. It said you would become the next keeper. I'm just following what's written, same as everyone else. I turned to face him. And what if I refuse? What if I don't come back? Walter smiled that sad smile again. Then you'll die on December 15th, and someone else will become keeper. Someone whose name I don't know yet. Someone who hasn't been chosen. But you, Sarah, you'll be gone forever. No second chance, no archive, just nothing. I stood there for a long moment. Outside this room, I had a small apartment, a job that barely paid rent, no family, few friends, and 30 days left to live. Inside this room, I had answers to every question, knowledge of every person's fate, and eternal life as a prisoner of infinite stories. Some choice. I need time to think, I said finally. You have 30 days, Walter replied. Use them wisely. And Sarah, if you decide to accept this, there's something else you should know, something I haven't told you yet, something about why the archive really exists and what happens when the books run out. My stomach dropped. What do you mean when the books run out? Walter walked to a specific shelf far in the back. He pointed to the last row. Unlike all the other shelves that stretched endlessly, this row had visible space at the end, empty space. The archive is finite. There are exactly 117 billion books here, one for every human who has ever lived or will ever live. And we're approaching the end, the last book, the final human. When? I whispered. According to the records, the last human will be born on August 3rd, 2847. After that, no more books appear. Humanity's story ends. I felt cold all over. So we go extinct?
The archive doesn't say how it ends, Walter said. It just stops. The final book appears, and then silence. And here's what you need to understand, Sarah. As keeper, you'll be here to see that final book appear. You'll be here when humanity's last story begins. and you'll be here when the archive seals itself forever. But what they didn't know was that I would discover something far more terrifying than humanity's end date. I would learn that some books could be rewritten. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that date, December 15th. I saw the blue Toyota. I saw James Peterson checking his phone. I saw my own death playing like a movie I couldn't turn off. On November 18th, I went back to the archive. Walter was waiting at his desk, as if he'd known I would come. Maybe he did. Maybe it was in his book. "I need to understand how this works," I said without greeting. "If everything is written, who wrote it? God? The universe? Some cosmic computer?" Walter gestured to a chair. "I've been keeper for 40 years, and I still don't have that answer. The archive simply exists. The books simply appear. They're here before the people are born. Your book existed before you took your first breath." "That's impossible." "Everything about this place is impossible," Walter said, "but it's real. Now, sit down. If you're serious about understanding, I need to teach you how the system works." I sat. Walter pulled out a large ledger from his desk drawer. It was handwritten, filled with notes and cross-references. The archive is organized by birth date and alphabetically by last name. Every book contains that person's complete life story, birth to death. Some books are thick, some are thin. A child who dies young might have a book of only 20 pages. Someone who lives to be 100 might have 1,000 pages. "Can I look at anyone's book?" I asked. "Like, could I read about my best friend, or the president, or some random stranger?" "Technically, yes, but there are rules. First, you can only remove 3 books from the shelves per day. More than that, and the archive starts to resist. The books become heavy. The room becomes confusing. It's like the archive is protecting itself from too much interference." "What's the second rule?" "Never read the last page of anyone's book while they're still alive." I frowned. "Why not?" Walter's expression darkened. "Because knowing someone's exact death date and circumstances changes how you interact with them. And when keepers start interfering with the outside world based on archive knowledge, bad things happen. People who weren't supposed to meet cross paths. Accidents that should happen get prevented, causing worse accidents later. The timeline tries to correct itself, and the corrections are never gentle." "So if I tried to save someone, like if I read that my friend was going to die and I warned them, what would happen?" "I don't know for certain," Walter admitted. "I've never been foolish enough to try, but other keepers have. In 1952, a keeper named Robert Mills tried to prevent a train accident. He read that 43 people would die when a train derailed outside Boston. He called in a bomb threat to delay the train. Did it work? The train was delayed by 2 hours, but when it finally left the station, it derailed in a different location. 67 people died instead of 43. The archive had corrected itself, but the correction was worse than the original event. Robert Mills went insane after that. He's still alive, actually, in a psychiatric facility in Maine. He doesn't speak anymore. He just sits and stares at walls." I swallowed hard. "Okay, so don't interfere. What else do I need to know?" Walter opened my book to a page near the middle. "Here's how to read the symbols. See these marks in the margins?" He pointed to small symbols that looked like stars and circles and triangles. "These indicate significant moments. A star means a major life decision. A circle means a death, either the person themselves or someone close to them. A triangle means they encountered the archive in some way." "People encounter the archive?" I asked. "Meaning others besides keepers?"
Rarely, maybe once every 10 years, someone stumbles into this place by accident. Their book shows they found the archive, stayed for a few minutes, then left thinking it was a dream or hallucination. They never come back. But I came back, because you're meant to be keeper. Your book has dozens of triangles, starting from tonight and continuing for centuries. Centuries. The word hung in the air like smoke. Walter closed my book and stood up. Come with me. I want to show you something important. He led me deep into the archive, past row after row of shelves. The temperature dropped as we walked. The air felt thicker. Finally, we reached a section that looked different from the rest. The books here were older, their leather bindings cracked and faded. Some had pages falling out. This is the ancient section, Walter said. Books of people who lived thousands of years ago. Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans. Every single human life recorded. He pulled out a book carefully. The cover was so old it almost crumbled at his touch. This is the book of a woman who lived in Rome in 47 A.D. Her name was Julia. She was a baker. She had 3 children. She died at age 34 from a fever.
I looked at the pages. They were written in a language I couldn't read, but somehow I understood the meaning. I could see Julia's life, her daily routine, her worries, her small joys. She had no idea she was part of history. She just lived her life, baked her bread, loved her children, and died. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I want you to understand the weight of what you'll carry as keeper," Walter said quietly. "Every person who has ever lived has a story. Most of them are forgotten by history. No one remembers Julia the baker. No one writes about her in textbooks. But her life mattered. She existed. And her story is here, preserved forever." He put the book back carefully. "As keeper, you become the guardian of all these stories. You witness lives that no one else will ever know about. You see the truth behind every historical event, every war, every triumph, every tragedy. You see humanity in its entirety, the beautiful and the terrible." We walked back toward his desk in silence. When we got there, Walter pulled out another ledger, this one locked with a small key he wore around his neck. "There's one more thing you need to know before you make your final decision," he said, unlocking the ledger. "The archive keeps a special record, a list of every keeper who has ever served." He opened the ledger to a page filled with names and dates. I counted them. 23 names. "The archive has existed for at least 4,000 years, Walter said. "We know this because the oldest books date back that far. But we don't know if there were keepers before the first one on this list. The archive doesn't keep records of itself, only of humanity." I scanned the names. The first was listed as Keeper Unknown, 1847 BC to 1803 BC. The most recent was Walter Hayes, 1985 to 2025. And below that, in fresh ink, was written Sarah Mitchell, 2025 to question marks. The question marks seemed to mock me. What happened to the other keepers? How did they die? Some died of old age, some protecting the archive. 3 of them went mad from the knowledge and had to be removed. One disappeared entirely. We don't know what happened to them. And one tried to destroy the archive. Destroy it? Why? Walter's expression became grim. Because they read too many books. They saw too much suffering, too many wars, too many diseases, too many children dying young. They decided that if humanity's fate was already written and couldn't be changed, then there was no point in preserving the records. They tried to burn the archive down. What stopped them? The archive stopped them, Walter said simply. The room sealed itself. The fire went out. The keeper was found unconscious, and when they woke, they couldn't remember their own name. The archive had erased them. Not killed them. Erased them. They lived for 30 more years after that, but they never spoke, never showed recognition of anything. They were empty. I felt sick again. So the archive can defend itself? The archive is alive in ways we don't understand. It has rules, it has will, and it doesn't tolerate threats. Remember that, Sarah. If you become keeper, you serve the archive, not the other way around. I looked around at the endless shelves, the millions of books, the weight of all those stories. Part of me wanted to run and never come back, but another part, a deeper part, felt something else. Curiosity, wonder, purpose. "Can I see my father's book?" I asked, suddenly. "Your father?" "I never met him. He left before I was born. My mother never talked about him. I don't even know his name. But if his book is here, I could find out who he was." Walter hesitated. "Sarah, that's personal history. Are you sure you want to know?" "I'm dying in 27 days. What's the point of protecting myself from painful truths now?" Walter sighed. He opened my book to the very first pages and scanned the text. "Your father's name is David Richardson, born June 12, 1978. Let me find his book." He walked to a different section and returned with a thin book, thinner than mine, thinner than most. "Here," he said, handing it to me. I opened it carefully. I saw my father as a young man. I saw him meet my mother in a concert in 2001. I saw them fall in love. I saw my mother get pregnant. And then I saw the page that explained everything. My father had a brain tumor, diagnosed 2 months before I was born. He left my mother not because he didn't love us, but because he didn't want us to watch him die. He thought it would be easier if we believed he just walked away. He died alone in a hospital in Seattle on November 8, 2002, 3 days after my first birthday. I closed the book, tears streaming down my face. He was protecting us. Most people's cruelty is actually kindness in disguise, or vice versa. The archive shows you the truth behind every action. Sometimes that truth is beautiful. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. I wiped my eyes. "When do I have to decide about becoming keeper?" "December 15th. When you die, you'll wake up here, and in that moment you can choose to accept the role or refuse it. If you refuse, you'll simply cease to exist. If you accept, you'll begin your service." But the real truth was still buried. What Walter hadn't told me yet was that one book in the entire archive was different from all the others. One book that could change everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed with the archive. I went every night after work learning everything Walter would teach me. I learned how to navigate the endless rows. I learned how to read the margin symbols. I learned which books were safe to open and which ones Walter warned me away from. "Never open books from the forbidden section," he told me on my 5th visit, pointing to a locked gate at the far eastern wall. "Those are the books of people who discovered things about the archive that even keepers shouldn't know." "What kind of things?" I asked. "I don't know," Walter admitted. "The previous keeper locked that section before he died. He told me that some knowledge is dangerous enough to collapse the entire archive. He made me promise never to open that gate." But I was curious, too curious. On December 1st, 14 days before my death date, I came to the archive at midnight as usual. Walter looked exhausted. He'd been coughing a lot lately, his hands shaking when he handled the books. "I need to rest," he said. "I'll be in the back room for a few hours. You can practice reading books, but remember the rules. No more than 3 per night. No reading last pages. No interfering with the outside world." "I remember," I said. Walter disappeared into a small room behind his desk. I heard a door close, then silence. I waited 10 minutes to make sure he was really resting. Then I walked toward the forbidden section. The gate was old iron, locked with a chain and padlock. But when I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The padlock was open, not unlocked. It had never been locked.
The chain was just wrapped around the bars to make it look secure. My heart pounded. Was this a test, or had Walter forgotten to actually lock it? I glanced back toward the rest area. No sound, no movement. I unwrapped the chain carefully and pushed the gate open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the archive. I froze, waiting for Walter to come running out. But nothing happened. Inside the forbidden section, the air felt different, heavier. The books here were arranged differently too, not by birth date and name, but by some other system I couldn't understand. Many of the spines had no names at all, just numbers. I pulled out the first book I saw, number 0001. Inside, the pages were blank, completely empty. I put it back and tried another, number 042, also blank. Then I found one that wasn't blank, number 0117. The first page showed a date, August 3rd, 2847, the last human's birth date. But this wasn't a life story. It was something else, something that made my hands shake as I read. It was instructions, a manual, a guide for how the archive worked. I read frantically, my eyes scanning the pages. The archive wasn't just a record of humanity, it was a machine, a device created by someone or something before recorded history. Its purpose was to observe humanity, document every life, and at the end, compile a final report on whether humanity was worth preserving. Preserving for what? I whispered to the empty room. I kept reading. The book explained that the last human was born and lived their life. The archive would seal itself and transmit all the collected data to somewhere. The destination wasn't named, but the implication was clear. Humanity was being evaluated, judged. And if we failed the evaluation, we would be erased. Not just future generations, all of us. Every human who had ever lived would be retroactively removed from existence, as if we'd never been. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be real, but the book was here in the archive, the same archive that had proven itself accurate about everything else. I flipped to the next page and found something even more shocking. There was a way to change the books. Not all of them, but some. Under specific circumstances, with specific tools, a keeper could alter what was written. They could change someone's fate. They could rewrite the future. That's impossible, I said out loud. The archive can't be changed. He said reality corrects itself. But the manual was clear. It listed the exact procedure. There was a special pen kept somewhere in the archive, a pen made from the same material as the books themselves. If a keeper used that pen to write in a book, the changes would become real. The person's fate would shift. Their future would follow the new path. But there was a cost. Every change required a balance. If you extended someone's life, someone else's life had to be shortened. If you prevented one death, another death had to occur. The archive demanded equilibrium. You couldn't create happiness without creating equal suffering somewhere else. I heard a noise behind me and spun around. Walter stood at the gate, his face pale with anger. "What have you done?" I was just looking. The gate wasn't locked. "It's not locked because it's a test," Walter shouted, his voice echoing through the archive. "Every keeper faces this test, and every keeper who fails it goes mad. You weren't supposed to read that book, Sarah. You weren't supposed to know about the pen. You weren't supposed to know any of this." "But it's true, isn't it?" I said, holding up the manual. "The archive is judging us, and we can change the books. We can change people's fates." Walter grabbed the book from my hands and slammed it shut. "Yes, it's true, and yes, you can change the books. But do you understand what happens when you do? Do you understand the price?"
"It said there's a balance." "The balance is arbitrary," Walter yelled. "You can't control who pays the price. You change one book, and the archive decides who suffers to balance it out. It might be someone you love. It might be a stranger. It might be a child. You can't choose. You can only change and hope the cost isn't too high." "Have you ever used the pen?" I asked. Walter's expression crumbled. He suddenly looked very old and very tired. "Once," he whispered, 30 years ago, my daughter was dying of leukemia. She was 8 years old. I read her book. She had 3 weeks to live. So I used the pen. I gave her a full life. I wrote that she would recover, grow up, get married, have children. I saved her." "That's amazing," I said. "You saved your daughter." "I killed my wife," Walter said flatly. "The balance. I extended my daughter's life by 70 years. Someone had to lose 70 years. It was my wife. She died the next day, sudden heart attack. She was 42 years old, perfectly healthy, and then she was gone." I felt cold. "I'm so sorry." "My daughter doesn't know," Walter continued. "She thinks her mother just died. She doesn't know I traded one life for another. She doesn't know I had a choice and I chose her over my wife. And I've lived with that guilt every single day since. That's the price of changing the books, Sarah. That's the burden you carry when you think you can play God." He put the manual back on the shelf and closed the gate, wrapping the chain around it. "This is why the forbidden section exists. This is why keepers aren't supposed to know about the pen. Because once you know it exists, the temptation to use it never goes away." "Where is the pen?" I asked. "I destroyed it," Walter said. "After what happened to my wife, I found the pen and threw it into a furnace. I watched it burn. I made sure no future keeper would be able to make the same mistake I did." But even as he said it, I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. He was lying. The pen still existed, and I was going to find it. This changed everything. December 10th, 5 days before my death. I stopped going to work. I called in sick, then just stopped calling. It didn't matter anymore. In 5 days, I'd be dead, or transformed into a keeper. Either way, my coffee shop job was over. I spent every waking moment in the archive. Walter tried to keep me away from the forbidden section, but I started exploring when he slept. I learned that the archive was much bigger than Walter had shown me. There were sub-levels, hidden rooms, entire wings he'd never mentioned. On December 12th, I found the room. It was hidden behind a shelf in the oldest section of the archive. The shelf looked like all the others, but when I pulled on a specific book, number 7443, the life story of a Persian merchant from 890 BC, the entire shelf swung open like a door. Behind it was a small chamber lit by a strange blue light. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal. On the pedestal was a pen. It looked ordinary, just a simple black pen you could buy at any store. But when I picked it up, it felt warm, alive. The archive seemed to hum around me, as if recognizing what I was holding. I heard footsteps running toward me. Walter burst into the chamber, his face twisted with panic. "Put it down, Sarah. Put it down right now." "You lied," I said calmly. "You said you destroyed it." "I tried," Walter said, breathing hard. "I threw it in the furnace. I watched it burn, but the next day it was back on the pedestal. The archive won't let the pen be destroyed. It's part of the system, part of the machine." I looked at the pen in my hand. With this, I could change my fate. I could erase December 15th. I could live. Who would pay the price? If I rewrote my book to survive, whose life would I shorten? "I don't know," Walter said. "The archive chooses. It might be someone random. It might be someone you know. You can't control it." I thought about James Peterson, the man who was supposed to kill me with his car. He was 34 years old, married with 2 young children. According to his book, which I'd read earlier that week, he would live to be 83. He would watch his grandchildren grow up. He would retire to Florida. He would die peacefully in his sleep. If I saved myself, would he pay the price? Would his children lose their father? Or would someone else pay?
a stranger I'd never meet, a child somewhere who would suddenly get sick, an old person whose final years would be stolen. "I can't do it," I said, setting the pen back on the pedestal. Walter's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank God. I was afraid you'd—" "But what if I changed something else, something that doesn't involve me? What if I found someone who was going to die young and gave them more time? What if I prevented a murder, or a war, or a tragedy?" "Sarah, no. You can't start down that path. Every change creates ripples. You can't predict what will happen."
"But we have to try," I said, my voice rising. "You showed me that manual. The archive is judging us. When the last human is born, everything we've ever done will be evaluated. And if we fail, if humanity fails, we all get erased. Everyone, every life in every book becomes nothing. So why can't we use the pen to make sure we pass the test? Why can't we change things for the better?" Walter stared at me. "Because we don't know what better means to whatever is judging us. We don't know what criteria they're using. We don't know what they want from humanity. All we know is that changing the books comes with a cost." "Then we be smart about it. We make strategic changes. We save good people. We stop evil people. We tilt the scales toward light instead of darkness. We give humanity a better story to show our judges." "It doesn't work that way," Walter said quietly. "I thought the same thing once. After I saved my daughter, I thought maybe I could use the pen for good, balance out the scales, make the world better. So I tried. I prevented a school shooting. I wrote in the shooter's book that he would get therapy, find peace, never hurt anyone." "That sounds like a good thing," I said. "The next day, his therapist died in a car accident," Walter said. "The balance. And without therapy, the shooter spiraled even worse. He didn't shoot up a school. Instead, he built a bomb and killed 14 people at a mall. My change made things worse. I tried to create good, and I created more suffering." I felt my conviction wavering, but I couldn't let go of the idea. What if we're thinking about this wrong? What if the pen isn't meant to change individual lives? What if it's meant to change the whole system? Walter frowned. "What do you mean?" I picked up the pen again, ignoring his protest. "The manual said the archive is a machine, a device. What if we can rewrite the machine itself? What if we can change the rules?" "That's insane. The archive has existed for thousands of years. You can't just—" "Where's the archives book?" I asked suddenly. "Every life has a book. Does the archive itself have a book?" Walter's face went white. "Sarah, don't." "Does it?" He didn't answer, but his silence told me everything. I ran out of the chamber, the pen clutched in my hand. Walter chased after me, shouting, but I was faster. I navigated the shelves based on instinct, following a pull I couldn't explain. The archive seemed to guide me, as if it wanted me to find what I was looking for. I reached a section I'd never seen before. The books here didn't have names or dates. They had symbols, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. One book was larger than all the others. Its cover was pure black, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I pulled it from the shelf. The moment I touched it, I felt electricity run through my body. Images flooded my mind. Ancient civilizations, alien architects, cosmic judges, the birth of the universe, the death of stars. This was the archive's book, the story of the archive itself. Walter caught up to me, breathing hard. "Sarah, please, if you open that book, you'll see things that will break you. Every keeper who's read it has gone mad. It's too much. The human mind can't process what's in there." "I have to know. I have to understand why this exists, why we're being judged, why everything is already written."
I opened the book. The first page showed the creation of the archive. It was built by beings that weren't human, beings that existed outside time and space. They created the archive as an experiment. They wanted to see if a species could develop consciousness, morality, and meaning while living in a predetermined universe. Humanity was the test subject. Every choice we'd ever made was already written, but we didn't know that. We lived our lives believing in free will, believing our choices mattered. And that belief, that beautiful, tragic illusion, was what was being studied. The beings wanted to know, could a species be good without true freedom? Could they create meaning in a meaningless system? Could they love, sacrifice, and grow even when every moment was scripted? I kept reading, tears streaming from my face. The book showed me the other experiments, other species on other worlds. Some had failed the test and been erased. Others had passed and been elevated to something beyond physical existence. Humanity's evaluation was still pending. We still had time. We still had a chance. But then I reached the page that changed everything. The archive wasn't just observing humanity. It was generating humanity. Every book didn't record what would happen. It created what would happen. The books came first, and reality followed the script. We weren't living in a predetermined universe. We were living in a written universe, a story being told by the archive itself. And the pen I was holding, it could rewrite the story. We're not real. We're characters in a book. No, Walter said firmly. We're real. Our choices may be written, but we still make them. Our feelings still matter. Our lives still have meaning. The fact that it's all part of a story doesn't make it less true. I looked at him with new understanding. You've read this before. You know what we are. I've known for 40 years, and I chose to keep serving anyway. Because even if we're characters, even if everything is written, our stories still matter. The love we feel is real. The pain we endure is real. The choices we make, even if they're scripted, are still our choices.
I looked down at the archive's book. There were thousands of pages left. I could read about the future. I could see how humanity's evaluation would end. I could know if we would pass or fail. But more importantly, I could change it. With the pen in my hand, I could rewrite the archive itself. I could give humanity free will, real free will. I could delete the predetermined script and let people truly choose their own paths. Don't do it, Walter said, reading my thoughts. If you erase the script, you erase everything. The archive is what holds reality together. Without it, the universe collapses. All the lives that have been lived, all the people who have ever existed, they'll all disappear. You'd save humanity's future by destroying humanity's past. But they'd be free, I said. For the first time, humans would actually be free. The battle was just beginning. I stood there, the archive's book in one hand, the pen in the other, staring at a choice that should have been impossible. Erase the script and give humanity free will, but destroy all of history in the process. Or keep the script and let humanity remain characters in a story written by cosmic beings. There has to be another way, I said. Walter shook his head sadly. There isn't. Every keeper reaches this moment. Every keeper stands exactly where you're standing now, and every keeper makes the same choice. They put the pen down, they close the book, they accept what we are, and keep serving. What if I'm different? I asked. Then you'll destroy everything, Walter said simply, and you'll have to live with that choice for eternity, because even if you erase everyone else, you'll still exist. The keeper can't be unmade. You'll be alone in an empty archive, surrounded by blank books for the rest of time. I looked at the pen. It would be so easy. One stroke across the page, one deletion of the predetermined script. Free will for humanity, purchased with the price of history. But then I thought about something else, something the manual had mentioned. The balance, I said slowly. Every change requires a balance. If I erase the script, what would balance that? What would the archive take in return? Walter's expression shifted. He hadn't considered that. I don't know. I flipped through the archive's book, searching for information about the pen's mechanics. I found a section that explained the balance system in detail. When a keeper changed a book, the archive calculated the impact of that change and automatically created a counterbalance somewhere else in the system. The keeper couldn't choose what the balance would be. The archive decided based on some cosmic algebra humans couldn't fully understand. But this was different. This was changing one person's book. This was changing the foundational book, the master book, the book that generated all the other books. I kept reading, and then I found it, a warning written in red ink that seemed to glow. Warning: alteration of archive prime book will result in total system cascade. Balance cannot be calculated. Probability of existential collapse, 100%. It would destroy everything, I whispered. Not just history, everything, the entire universe, all of reality. Walter nodded grimly. That's why no keeper has ever done it. That's why the pen exists but can't be used on the archive itself. It's the ultimate test of wisdom. Can you resist the temptation to fix everything, even when you have the power to try? I closed the archive's book carefully and set it back on the shelf. Then I looked at the pen in my hand. So much power in such a small object. What if we don't try to change the whole system? I said. What if we just optimize it, make small changes that improve humanity's evaluation? We've already gone over this. Small changes create unpredictable ripples. You can't control. But we can be smart about it, I interrupted. We can study the books, find patterns, identify key moments in history where a small change would have massive positive effects. We don't have to delete the script. We just have to edit it, carefully, strategically. Walter was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we actually try to help humanity pass the test. We have access to every human life. We can see what leads to suffering and what leads to flourishing. We can identify the patterns of evil and interrupt them. We can find the heroes before they give up and encourage them. We can prevent the worst atrocities while accepting that some suffering is necessary for growth. That's playing God, Walter said. We're already playing God by doing nothing, I argued. The archive is evaluating humanity based on a script that was written before we even existed. We're being judged for actions we had no real control over. Don't we have a responsibility to at least try to make the story better? Walter walked to his desk and sat down heavily. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. 40 years, he said quietly. 40 years I've been keeper, and I've never once used the pen, except to save my daughter. I've watched wars start. I've read about genocides before they happened. I've seen children's books that end only after a few pages. And I've done nothing, because I was afraid. Afraid of making things worse. Afraid of the balance. What if we tested it? I suggested. One small change, something minor. We monitor the results carefully. If it goes wrong, we don't do it again. But if it works, we could really make a difference. Walter looked at me with those sad, ancient eyes. You really believe that? You think we can make a difference?
I have to believe it, I said, because in 3 days I'm going to die and become keeper. And if I'm going to spend eternity in this room, I need to know I'm doing more than just watching. I need to know I'm helping. Walter stood up and walked to a specific shelf. He pulled out a book, a thin one. At age 16, he'll shoot another teenager during a robbery. He'll go to prison. He'll die in a fight with another inmate at age 24. Walter handed me the book. If you want to test the pen, start with him. Change his path. Save him from the gang. Give him a different future, and we'll see what the balance takes in return. I opened Marcus's book. I saw his life. An absent father, a mother working 3 jobs, poverty, violence, hopelessness. The gang wasn't just something he joined. It was survival. It was family. It was the only path he could see. What should I write? I asked. What would change his trajectory? Walter said. What single event could give him a different path? I thought about it. I read through his book carefully, looking for pivot points. Then I found it. In 6 months, Marcus would try out for his middle school basketball team and get cut. The rejection would push him deeper into isolation, making him more vulnerable to gang recruitment. What if he made the team? I said. What if the coach gave him a chance? Write it, Walter said, but be specific. The archive responds to specific language. I uncapped the pen. My hand shook. This was it. The moment I either helped someone or destroyed everything with unintended consequences. I found the page describing the basketball tryout. The original text read, Marcus missed 3 free throws in a row. Coach Williams cut him from the team. Marcus walked home alone, feeling worthless. I used the pen to carefully cross out the text. Then I wrote, Marcus missed 2 free throws but made the 3rd. Coach Williams saw potential and put him on the team as a reserve. Marcus walked home feeling proud, thinking maybe he could be good at something. The moment I finished writing, the text glowed. The original words faded completely, replaced by my new version. The glow spread through the pages, and I watched as the rest of Marcus's book rewrote itself automatically. He stayed on the basketball team, he got better, he earned a scholarship to a state university, he became a social worker, helping other kids avoid the gangs. He lived to age 72 with 3 children and 8 grandchildren. It worked, I whispered. I saved him. Now we wait for the balance, Walter said grimly. We didn't have to wait long. An alarm started blaring throughout the archive, a sound I'd never heard before. Walter ran to his desk and pulled out a different ledger. He scanned it quickly, his face going pale. No, no, no. What is it? What's the balance? Walter turned the ledger toward me. It showed a list of deaths, people whose books had just been altered. 17 names. 17 people who were alive were now marked as dead. The coach, Walter said, his voice shaking. Coach Williams. In the original timeline, he lived to be 68, but in the new timeline, he dies of a heart attack at age 43, next month. The stress of coaching an expanded team, the extra hours, the additional games, it puts too much strain on his heart. I felt sick. I killed the coach to save Marcus. It's not just him, Walter continued, reading the list. 16 other people's books changed. Small changes. A woman in Seattle who now dies in a car accident because she's running late to pick up her daughter because her daughter stayed late at basketball practice. A man in Boston who has a fatal allergic reaction because the restaurant he was going to closed early because the owner's son started playing basketball and the owner wanted to watch his games. The ripples spread. Each change creates more changes. The balance isn't 1 for 1. It's exponential. I grabbed the ledger. 17 dead. And for what? To save one 12-year-old who hadn't even done anything wrong yet? Who might have found another path without my intervention? We have to undo it, I said. We have to change it back. You can't, Walter said. Once you write in a book, those are the new facts. If you try to change it again, you create another cascade, more balances, more deaths.
The only way to stop is to stop. But they had one more card to play, and it wasn't the pen. The alarm kept blaring. Walter tried to shut it off, but nothing worked. The sound echoed through the endless archive, bouncing off shelves, growing louder and more insistent. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. Walter pulled open a drawer in his desk and took out an ancient manual, different from the one I'd seen before. This one was handwritten, the pages yellow and fragile. When the balance creates too many cascading changes, the archive enters crisis mode. It tries to self-correct, but sometimes the corrections are severe. What does that mean? He showed me a page. In 1923, a keeper named Sarah Brennan, yes, same first name as you, used the pen to prevent World War I. She thought if she could stop that war, millions of lives would be saved. She changed the book of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Instead of being assassinated, he survived. The war never started.
That sounds amazing, I said. It created a worse timeline, Walter said, his face grim. Without World War I, the geopolitical tensions kept building. Different alliances formed, different weapons were developed. In 1934, a worse war broke out. Nuclear weapons were invented earlier. 50 million more people died than in our original timeline. The archive's balance tried to self-correct by creating an even greater catastrophe. So what did she do? She panicked, Walter said. She tried to change it back. She used the pen over and over, trying to fix each new problem she created. With each change, the balance demanded more. People started dying in waves, entire cities. The archive's alarm system activated, just like now, and then he turned to a page that made my blood run cold. It showed a drawing of the archive itself, but the shelves were crumbling, books were falling, pages were turning to ash. The archive started collapsing, Walter continued. When too many changes happen too quickly, the foundation breaks down. The books can't maintain coherence. Reality itself becomes unstable. Sarah Brennan tried one final change. She used the pen on the archive's book, attempting to reset everything. But the moment she did, there was an explosion of light. When it faded, she was gone. Not dead, gone, erased from existence. Her book disappeared from the shelves. It was as if she'd never been born. "And the war?" I asked. "Reverted to the original timeline. World War I happened as it was always meant to. The archive healed itself by erasing the keeper who caused the damage. That's the final defense mechanism. If a keeper threatens the archive's stability, the archive removes them." I looked down at the pen still in my hand. I'd only made one change, Marcus Webb's basketball tryout, but it had already killed 17 people. How many more would die as those ripples spread? How many more cascades would occur? "I have to fix this," I said. "You can't," Walter said firmly. "The only way forward is to let the balance play out. The archive will stabilize eventually. The cascades will stop. But you have to stop using the pen now, forever." "But Marcus will live his new life, and 17 people will die who weren't supposed to, and thousands more lives will be slightly different because of the ripples. You can't undo it without making it worse. This is the burden, Sarah. This is what I tried to warn you about." The alarm suddenly stopped. The silence was almost worse than the noise. Walter checked his ledgers. "The balance has settled, for now, but the archive is fragile. Any more changes and we risk total collapse." I set the pen on his desk. "I'm done. I won't use it again." "Good. Now give me Marcus's book." I handed it to him. He took it to a special section I hadn't noticed before, a locked cabinet marked "Altered Records." Inside were maybe 30 other books, each tagged with a red ribbon. "These are all the books that have been changed by keepers. We keep them separate, monitor them, make sure the cascades don't spread beyond control. Some of these changes are ancient, some are recent. Each one represents a keeper who thought they could improve the story. Each one came with a terrible price." He placed Marcus's book inside and locked the cabinet.
As of today, there are 31 altered lives in all of human history. 31 times a keeper broke the rules. 31 times the balance had to be paid. How many people died for those 31? I asked quietly. Walter pulled out a ledger and showed me a number written in red. 847 people dead because keepers tried to help. I felt like I might throw up. And we're supposed to just watch? Just read these books and do nothing, even when we see suffering we could prevent? Yes, Walter said simply. That's the job. That's the burden. We witness, we preserve, we serve, but we don't interfere. The moment we start trying to fix things, we become the problem. I walked to a shelf and pulled out a random book. It belonged to a woman named Jennifer Torres, born in 1995. I flipped through her life. She would struggle with depression, lose her job, attempt suicide at age 30 but survive, eventually find therapy, heal, and spend her later years helping others with mental health issues. Her suffering had purpose. It led to growth, both for her and for the people she'd help. If I used the pen to remove her depression, would she still become that therapist? Would the people she helped find someone else? Or would they spiral into darkness without her? Every life was a thread in a tapestry I couldn't fully see. Every change pulled threads in unpredictable directions. I understand now, I said, putting Jennifer's book back. I understand why you've done nothing for 40 years. Walter nodded. The hardest part of being keeper isn't the isolation or the loneliness. It's the knowledge combined with the powerlessness. We see everything, but we can change nothing, not without making it worse. So we just exist here forever? We bear witness. We remember the forgotten. We preserve the stories that would otherwise be lost. We serve the archives so that when humanity is finally judged, every life, every single life is accounted for. That's the purpose. That's the meaning. I looked around at the millions of books, billions of stories, every joy, every sorrow, every triumph, every tragedy, all recorded, all preserved, all part of a grand story being evaluated by beings we couldn't comprehend. What if we fail? What if humanity's evaluation is negative? What happens to all of this?
Walter was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, I don't know. The archives book doesn't say. It just shows that the evaluation will happen on August 3rd, 2847, when the last human is born and lives their life. After that, blank pages. Maybe we're erased. Maybe we're transformed. Maybe we're given another chance. The archive doesn't reveal its own ending. That's 2 days from now, I said suddenly, my mind racing. Not 2 days now, I mean from my death. I die on December 15th. I wake up as keeper on December 16th. And December 16th, 2025 is when... I stopped. My brain had gotten confused with the dates. No, that wasn't right. The last human would be born in 2847, more than 800 years from now. But something still felt wrong. I pulled out my own book and flipped to December 16th, the day after my death, when I would supposedly wake up as keeper. The page was different than I remembered. It didn't show me waking up in the archive. It showed me waking up in a completely different place, a white room, empty, and standing in front of me was a figure made of light. Walter, I said slowly, I think we have a problem. He came over and looked at the page. His face went ashen. That's not possible, he whispered. Your book shouldn't show this. Keepers' books end at the moment of transformation. There's nothing after. Nothing. But my book had something after. It showed me meeting the light being. It showed me learning the truth about the archive. It showed me making a choice that would determine humanity's fate. And the date wasn't 2847. It was December 16th, 2025. Tomorrow. The evaluation isn't in 800 years, I said, my voice shaking. It's tomorrow. The last human has already been born, and somehow
I'm supposed to be the one who decides if humanity passes or fails. This was my last chance. December 15th, 2025, my death day. I didn't go to work. I didn't leave my apartment. I spent the morning reading my book over and over, trying to understand what would happen at 7:15 p.m. when the blue Toyota ran the red light. Walter had called me 3 times. I ignored all of them. I needed to think. According to my book, I would die, but I would also wake up the next day and meet a being of light who would ask me to judge humanity. Me, Sarah Mitchell, 23-year-old failed history major who worked at a coffee shop and had no idea what she was doing with her life. Why me? At 6:30 p.m., I finally left my apartment. I walked toward State and Monroe, the intersection where I was supposed to die. The winter air was cold. Christmas lights twinkled in shop windows. People rushed past me, heading home to families, to warm dinners, to lives that would continue after tonight. I reached the corner at 7:10 p.m., 5 minutes early. I could leave, I could walk away, I could take a different route, call a taxi, do anything other than stand on this exact corner at 7:15 p.m. But Walter's warning echoed in my mind. When you try to change it, reality finds a way to keep the story on track. At 7:14 p.m., I saw the blue Toyota. It was stopped at a red light 2 blocks away. The driver was a man in his 30s, James Peterson, married, 2 kids, about to check his phone and make a terrible mistake. I could see his book in my mind. I'd read it at the archive. James was a good person. He volunteered at his kids' school. He helped his elderly neighbor with groceries. He made one mistake, one moment of distraction, and it would haunt him for the rest of his life. 7:15 p.m. I stepped off the curb. The Toyota ran the red light. Everything slowed down. I could see James's face clearly, the moment he looked up from his phone and saw me. The horror in his eyes, the way his mouth opened to scream. The impact never came. Instead, I felt a pulling sensation. The world turned inside out. Colors inverted. Sound became light. Light became pressure. And then, silence. I opened my eyes to a white room, completely white. No doors, no windows, no features at all. Just endless white in every direction. And standing in front of me was a figure made of light. "Hello, Sarah," the being said. Its voice wasn't sound. It was direct communication, thought to thought. "Welcome to the evaluation chamber." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I managed, "Am I dead?" "Your physical form in the baseline reality has ceased functioning, yes, but you are not dead. You are transitioning. Your consciousness is being prepared for its new role." "Keeper?" I said. "That is one possible outcome, but first you must complete the evaluation." "I don't understand. I thought humanity was being evaluated, not me." The being moved closer. It was hard to look at directly, like staring at the sun. "The evaluation has always been about individual choice, not species destiny. Humanity as a whole is a collection of individual stories. To judge the whole, we must judge the parts. And you, Sarah Mitchell, are the final part." "Final?" I repeated. "But there are billions of people alive. How can I be the final?"
The archive contains 117 billion books, the being interrupted. One for every human who has ever lived or will ever live. Your book is number 117 billion. You are the last human, the final story. After you, no more humans will be born. I felt dizzy. That can't be right. I'm nobody. I'm just... "You are exactly what you need to be," the being said.
The evaluation was always designed to culminate with someone ordinary, someone who represents the average of human experience, not a hero or a villain, not a genius or a fool, just a person, living a life, making choices. "What choices?" I asked. "My whole life is written in a book. I don't make choices. I follow a script." The being tilted its head, or what I perceived as a head. "Do you believe that, after everything you've learned in the archive?" I thought about Marcus Webb. I thought about the pen. I thought about Walter and the 17 people who died because I tried to change one boy's fate. "I don't know what I believe anymore," I admitted. "Good," the being said. "Uncertainty is the beginning of wisdom. Now let me show you something." The white room changed. Suddenly I could see the archive below me, not physically, but as a concept. I could see all 117 billion books at once, all the lives, all the stories, woven together in a tapestry of impossible complexity. "The archive is not a prison," the being explained. "It is a record, but the record is created by the choices made, not the other way around. You humans have always struggled with this paradox: determinism versus free will, fate versus choice. The truth is both and neither." "That doesn't make sense," I said. "From your perspective, no," the being agreed. "But from our perspective, beings who exist outside time, every moment happens simultaneously. Your birth and death are the same event, viewed from different angles. The book of your life exists before you are born, because to us you have already lived it. But you still lived it. You still made every choice. The fact that we can see the whole story at once doesn't mean the story wasn't yours to write." I tried to wrap my mind around it. "So I have free will, but you can predict all my choices?" "We don't predict, we observe. The difference is subtle but important. You chose to use the pen. You chose to try to save Marcus. Those were your choices. The fact that they were written in the archive doesn't make them less real. It just means we were watching." "Then why the evaluation?" I demanded. "If you're just watching, why judge us? Why threaten to erase humanity if we fail some cosmic test?" The being was quiet for a moment. Then it said something that shocked me. "We're not the ones judging you. You are." "What?" "The evaluation has always been humanity judging itself. We created the archive as a mirror. We filled it with every human life, so that one day a human could look at the complete picture and decide, was it worth it? Does this species deserve to continue? Do these stories have value?" "And you want me to make that decision?" I asked, incredulous. "Based on what criteria? How am I supposed to judge 117 billion lives?" "By answering one question," the being said. "After seeing everything, the wars and the peace, the cruelty and the kindness, the suffering and the joy, do you believe humanity's story should continue, or should it end?" I looked at the tapestry of lives below me. I could see patterns. I could see the cycles of violence and healing. I could see individuals making brave choices in impossible circumstances. I could see selfishness and sacrifice. I could see beauty and horror intertwined so completely that they were inseparable. "I can't answer that. It's too big. I'm too small." "You are exactly the right size," the being said gently. "You are human. You've lived a human life. You felt human pain and human hope. You know what it means to struggle with powerlessness. You know what it means to want to change things and fail. You know what it means to be written into a story you didn't choose." "What happens if I say humanity should end?" I asked. "Then it ends," the being said simply.
All the books are closed. All the stories conclude. The species is retired from the experiment. No one suffers. No one struggles. It's simply over. And if I say humanity should continue, then you become keeper. You return to the archive. You witness the final generation as they live out their lives. And when the last human dies, when the last book is closed, you seal the archive and present the complete record to us. We will study it for eons, learning what we can about consciousness and choice and meaning. And then you will be released, transformed into something beyond human form, a being like me, eternal, free. I looked at the being of light. You were human once? It confirmed. I was the evaluator for my species. I said yes. I chose to continue. I served as keeper for 10,000 years of my world's time, and when my duty was complete, I joined the collective. Now I create archives for other species, other experiments. The cycle continues. How many species have you evaluated? I asked. It is your 847th. How many said yes? The being was quiet. Then 6. 6 out of 847. Those were terrible odds. What made the difference? Why did those 6 species continue while the others ended? The evaluators saw something worth preserving, a quality, a pattern, a reason to believe that the suffering had meaning, that the story, despite its flaws, was worth telling.
I thought about Walter, alone in the archive for 40 years, preserving stories no one else would ever read. I thought about Marcus Webb, given a second chance at a cost he would never know. I thought about my father, dying alone to protect my mother and me from watching him suffer. I thought about Julia the baker from ancient Rome, living a quiet life that mattered to no one but herself and her children. Every life a story. Every story full of choices made without knowing the full consequences. Every person doing their best with incomplete information and limited power. We were flawed. God, we were so flawed. But we tried. In our fumbling, ignorant, sometimes selfish way, we tried. I need to see something, I said to the being of light. Before I decide, I need to see the book of the last person who will be born, the final human. The being nodded. The white room shifted, and suddenly I was holding a book. It was thin, very thin, maybe 40 pages. The child's name was Emma Park. She would be born on August 3rd, 2847, in a small settlement in what used to be called New Zealand. The world's population by then would be only 127,000 people. Humanity had declined slowly over the centuries, not from war or disease, but from choice. People simply had fewer children, chose smaller families. The species was naturally winding down. Emma would live to age 17. She would spend her life studying old books from before the decline. She would dream about the billions of people who once filled the earth. She would wonder what it was like when humans covered every continent, built massive cities, reached for the stars. And on her 17th birthday, she would write a letter. It was included in her book, the final thing she would ever write. The letter said, "To whoever reads this, I was the last one born. I know that because the scholars told me. They said after me no more babies came. I don't know why. Maybe humanity was tired. Maybe we'd said everything we needed to say. But I want you to know, whoever you are, reading this in whatever future exists, that we were here. We lived, we loved, we struggled and failed and tried again. We made beautiful things and terrible things. We were complicated and contradictory and confused, but we were real. Our stories mattered. Remember us."
I closed the book, tears streaming down my face. "I have my answer," I said to the being of light. The being waited. The white room seemed to hold its breath. "Humanity should continue," I said firmly. "Not because we're perfect, not because we always make the right choices, but because we keep trying. Even Emma Park, the last human, born into a dying world, she still had hope. She still wanted to be remembered. She still believed our stories mattered. How can I say that's not worth preserving?" The being's light seemed to pulse with something like approval. "You understand, then. The evaluation was never about perfection. It was about meaning. Can a species find meaning in a predetermined universe? Can they create value even when they suspect everything is written? Humanity's answer is yes. You chose to try even when you knew you might fail. You chose to love even when you knew you'd lose. You chose to hope even when hope seemed irrational." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you return to the archive. You serve as keeper until August 3rd, 2864, the day Emma Park dies and the final book is closed. That's 17 years after her birth, 39 years from your perspective. Then you seal the archive, present the record to us, and join the collective." 39 years, I repeated. That seemed both impossibly long and remarkably short. "You won't be alone," the being said. "Walter will be there for 6 more months. He'll teach you everything he knows. And after he passes, you'll have the books, all 117 billion stories to keep you company. You'll know more about humanity than any human ever has. You'll witness the end of the species from beginning to finish, seeing how every life contributed to the whole." The white room began to fade. I felt the pulling sensation again, reality reversing, bringing me back. "One more thing," I said quickly. "The pen. What should I do about the pen?" The being's light flickered. "The pen exists as a test, a temptation. Every keeper must decide whether to use it. My advice? Remember Marcus Webb. Remember the balance. Remember that your role is to witness, not to interfere. But the choice is yours. It always was." Then I was falling, tumbling through darkness, and suddenly I opened my eyes in the archive. I was lying on a cot in the back room. Walter sat beside me, looking relieved. "Thank God. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. I was starting to worry the transition failed." I sat up slowly. My body felt different, lighter, like I was slightly disconnected from physical reality. It worked. I met the evaluator. I made the choice. "And?" Walter asked anxiously. "Humanity continues," I said. "We passed." Walter's shoulders sagged with relief. He looked like he might cry. 40 years. 40 years I've been wondering if we'd make it, if our species had done enough, been enough. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for saying yes. "I almost said no," I admitted. "When I saw the numbers, 6 species out of 847, I almost ended it. The odds seemed so bad." "But you didn't," Walter said. "You saw what I've always hoped someone would see, that our worth isn't measured by success or failure. It's measured by the attempt, by the willingness to keep trying despite the odds."
I stood up and walked to the main room. The archive stretched out before me, my home for the next 39 years. Millions of books, billions of stories, all waiting to be witnessed. "Walter," I said, "tell me about your daughter, the one you saved. What's her life like now?" Walter pulled out a book from a locked drawer, his daughter's book. "Her name is Rebecca. She's 38 years old. She's a pediatric oncologist. She treats children with cancer, children like she once was. She saved 14 lives so far, 14 children who would have died without her. So the balance wasn't just your wife, I said quietly. Your wife died, but Rebecca lived and saved 14 others. The ripples go both ways. The balance creates suffering, but also creates unexpected good. Walter nodded. That's what I've learned in 40 years. Every choice, every change, every life, it's all connected. You can't calculate the full impact. You can only trust that somehow, in ways we can't see, it all adds up to something meaningful. Over the next 6 months, Walter taught me everything. How to maintain the shelves, how to handle books that were falling apart, how to record significant events in the ledger, how to resist the temptation to interfere, even when you read about preventable tragedies. The hardest ones are the children, he told me one night. You'll read books that are only a few pages long, babies who die in infancy, kids who get sick or have accidents. You'll want to use the pen. You'll want to save them, but you can't. You have to remember the balance. You have to remember Marcus Webb and the 17 people who died. I'll remember, I promised. Walter died on June 3rd, 2026, exactly as his book predicted. Heart failure, peaceful, in his sleep. I found him in the morning, still sitting at his desk, a book open in front of him. It was his daughter's book. He'd been reading about her life, seeing the good she'd done. I buried his book in the special section, the Keeper's Memorial. 23 keepers before me, each with their own story, now 24. And then I was alone. The first few years were the hardest. The isolation was crushing. No one to talk to, nothing to do but read books and maintain the archive. I thought about leaving, going back to the outside world, but when I tried, reality felt wrong. Time moved differently for me now. An hour outside the archive felt like days. I aged faster, got confused. The archive was my anchor, my prison, and my home. So I read. I read about ancient civilizations. I read about medieval peasants. I read about industrial workers and space explorers and everyone in between. I read about people whose names would never appear in history books, but who lived full, complex, meaningful lives. I read about the woman who invented a new farming technique that fed thousands but died unknown. I read about the teacher who inspired a student who went on to cure a disease. I read about the man who stopped someone from jumping off a bridge and never knew that person later saved a child from drowning. Ripples, endless ripples, every life touching other lives in ways the person never knew. I found patterns. I saw that kindness often came from people who had suffered, that cruelty often came from fear, that love was the one force that appeared in every single book, in every culture, in every time period. Love took different forms, romantic, familial, platonic, spiritual, but it was always there, the connecting thread. 20 years into my service, I finally understood what the evaluator meant about humanity creating meaning in a predetermined universe. Even though everything was written, even though we couldn't change the script, we still chose how to live it. We still chose whether to meet our fate with courage or despair. We still chose whether to help others or turn away. The fact that it was all recorded didn't make it less real. If anything, it made it more precious. These moments, these choices were preserved forever, witnessed, remembered. I never used the pen again. I thought about it sometimes. I'd read about preventable tragedies and feel the weight of the pen in my pocket. But I remembered Walter's warning. I remembered the 17 deaths. I remembered that my role was to witness, not to interfere. On August 3rd, 2084, The final book appeared on the shelves, Emma Park's book. I held it carefully, knowing this was the last human story that would ever be written. I read it slowly, savoring every page, Emma's childhood, her education, her dreams of a world filled with billions of people, her final letter. When I finished, I cried, not from sadness exactly, from completion, from knowing that humanity's story, all 117 billion chapters, was now complete. We did it. We lived. We struggled. We created meaning in a universe that didn't guarantee it. I watched Emma's life from the archive. I saw her being born on a bright August morning. I saw her grow up, curious and bright. I saw her write her final letter on her 17th birthday in 2864. And when she died, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by people who loved her, I closed her book for the last time. The archive began to seal itself. The shelves started to fold inward, compressing impossibly. The books merged into pure data, pure information. I felt the pull, the transformation beginning. The evaluator appeared before me, that being of light I'd met 39 years ago. You have completed your service, Sarah Mitchell. The record is complete. Humanity's story has been preserved. Now comes your reward. What happens to the books? What happens to all the stories?
They become part of the collective knowledge, the evaluator said. Other species will study them, learn from them. Humanity's successes and failures will teach others who face similar struggles. Your species failed to survive physically, but your stories will live forever. We didn't fail, I said firmly. We chose to wind down naturally. We decided when we'd said everything we needed to say. That's not failure, that's completion. The evaluator's light pulsed with approval. Yes, you understand. Are you ready to join us, to become eternal? To help evaluate other species? I thought about it. An eternity of witnessing other lives, other worlds, other archives. Yes, I said, I'm ready. The transformation began. My body dissolved into light. My consciousness expanded. I could see across time and space. I could see the other archives, the other species being evaluated, the endless cycle of creation and observation. But even as I transformed, I carried one thing with me, a memory, a knowledge, a truth. I had witnessed 117 billion human lives, and every single one of them mattered. Sarah Mitchell, keeper of the archive, became something beyond human, but she never forgot what it meant to be human, to struggle with uncertainty, to make choices without knowing their full impact, to hope despite the odds. And somewhere in the infinite database of preserved knowledge, Emma Park's letter still exists, the final message from humanity to whatever future comes next. We were here. We lived. We loved. We struggled and failed and tried again. We made beautiful things and terrible things. We were complicated and contradictory and confused, but we were real. Our stories mattered. Remember us. And they would be remembered forever, because Sarah Mitchell had said yes. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you see life differently, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button to help this message reach more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on that notification bell, because I've got so many more mind-bending stories coming your way.